What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my builds guide and refined review for Hilda, Keaton, Rutger and the one and only Lion King. So Mufasa ends up getting a pretty nice weapon refined to his Lion King Fang, and he can function so much better now as an enemy phase unit. So he still gets +4 to all of his stats in combat with this weapon, and now he can get 70% damage reduction against foes' follow-up attacks and also AoE specials. So this allows him to be so much more bulky against the units that are going to be doubling him, and most units are going to be doubling him because he is a slow unit, and having this kind of damage reduction against AoE specials definitely makes him pretty strong against the meta AoE units like Summer Thor for example. Being a beast armor, he does have the conditional distant counter which does require him to transform, and with this refine he's able to get -5 attack and defense debuff on the opponent in combat, and he also gets a guaranteed follow-up attack, which is huge because he doesn't have to rely on his fighter skills to get the follow-up attacks. And finally, if he's transformed, then he's able to get extra attack, defense and resistance in combat based on 25% of foes' visible attack stat subtracted by -8, and this can go up to all the way to 10. So just to give you an idea and to simplify this works on the visible attack stat of the enemy. So if you're facing an enemy with 72 visible attack stat, then Mufasa is able to get +10 to his attack, defense and resistance in combat, which can make him really tanky. And seeing as how high the attack stat of some units can be, this effect can scale really well to them and also against many of the merged up opponents. Mufasa with this weapon refine ends up becoming a pretty solid far-safe tank, especially when he has got the freedom to run Hardy Fighter and still get the double attacks with this weapon, and he can also run Special Fighter if he wants to, but Hardy Fighter is almost always going to be better so that he can get even more damage reduction, and especially get damage reduction on foes' first attack, against whom he doesn't really have the damage reduction. He can also get a lot of stats out of this weapon, so he can be deceptively bulky in that regard. He has faced a lot of competition with Fallen Edelgard, but with this weapon refine, in many situations, he's actually going to be functioning better than Fallen Edelgard in the enemy phase. So this weapon refine is really stacked and overall makes him into a much better armor tank. Having said that, he's definitely one of the best far-safe tanks that he can run, but he's still not the best one and definitely not even top 3 in my opinion. There are definitely a couple of blue far-safe tanks that he can imagine that occupy that spot. Still, he's among the best when it comes to being a far-safe tank, and even at low investment, just because of the fact that this refine is pretty stacked, he can give you good results and still function really well. So you're definitely going to be seeing the mighty Lion King quite a lot now after his weapon refine. So if you want to build him up on a budget, then you can stick with his distant defense 4 and just run guard, because Vengeful Fighter is a bit redundant with the auto follow-up that you can already get out of this weapon refine, and it can be helpful to break through some of the follow-up negation effects, but Mufasa is not really that fast to make full use out of that, and that's why I think that guard effect is still pretty nice on the budget. Now of course, because you're on a budget, you cannot really afford any kind of save skills, but still this could be nice for any kind of limited hero battle honestly. So you can just run a Breath Sacred Seal and a 4-turn special like Ignis. If you want to invest a bit more into him, then I would say that Hardy Fighter and a far safe skill are pretty much his best slot B and slot C options respectively. Hardy Fighter being a really good option because it can work in so many game modes, and Hardy Fighter can protect you from the pre-charged specials of Deadeye Duochrome and also from Lethality Yuri, which are among the prime threats in Summoner Duels and in a lot of the competitive game modes. And the damage reduction you get out of the defensive specials and Hardy Fighter is going to be able to stop that. So with Hardy Fighter, you're able to get damage reduction of 50% on foes' first attack, and then because of his weapon refine, you're able to get 70% damage reduction on the follow-up attacks. So he can be really tanky by running Hardy Fighter, and because he already has guaranteed follow-up attack with his weapon, he's not really going to be missing out on the firepower too much. And as it is, I would prioritize the survival of a far-safe tank over like killing in most cases, especially in game modes like Summoner Duels or Aether Raids offense or defense. So this is going to be a pretty nice build. And the good thing is that Mufasa already comes with one of the best slot A skills for any kind of far-safe tank, which is Distant Defense 4. The reason why this skill is so good is because a lot of nukes are often going to be having some kind of attack buff, and Distant Defense 4 can help you shut down the attack buff that Duochrome gets after his 2-change fate, and it can also help you in a major way against Duo Dagger and her weapon, so that's why this is a really good slotted skill. And I don't really think that you should bother switching this for something else like Bracing Stance or Defense Res Unity unless you have a lot of those fodder, but for most people, Distant Defense 4 is definitely workable and quite good. The Stance skill can actually help you in some matchups where the nukes are going to be triggering their Lethality or Deadeye on the second hit, and in that situation, having the guard effect can really help you prevent them, but if they're running a tempo skill, then your guard effect doesn't really mean much, and in that case, Distant Defense 4 is still going to be giving you that support. You can also run a Bread Sacred Seal so that he can charge up Sacred Cowl again, and that can be helpful in many matchups, but he can also just run any kind of Sacred Seal that can stack up his defenses. Because of the auto follow-up that he gets out of his weapon, Hardy Fighter and Special Fighter are pretty much the two main options that he can run in his slot B, and Special Fighter is pretty much the second best option. That's not the best one for survival because Hardy Fighter is just that amazing, but still Special Fighter can help you get the guard effect and get the special acceleration, so it can pretty much help you one-shot a lot of the foes with Moonbow or Glimmer, so it is going to be focusing on one-shot instead of survival. You can also try and run Sacred Cowl if you want to, but he already gets damage reduction on foes' follow-up attacks, so I don't really think it's going to be that effective, and it's much better to spread out the damage reduction for multiple hits than just focusing on the second hit, for example. This kind of build can definitely work in Aether Raids offense, especially if you give him some good support so that he can get even more stats and just have better survivability against a lot of the nukes. Hilda gets a pretty unique weapon refine that can make her into a good support unit and also make her function better in the combat. And above that, this weapon refine is just so in character to her. So now with Free Kugel weapon refine, she can get plus 11 attack and speed in combat. And the other part of this refine can seem quite convoluted, so I'm gonna try to explain this as simple as I can. So basically there are two parts of this weapon. One where Hilda is lazy, and the second part where Hilda is not lazy. So where she's lazy is the part where she can provide the support to her allies. So if she's not entered in any kind of combat in that phase, or if the allies within two spaces have got more defense than Hilda, then she's able to provide them with +4 to all of their stats in combat, and also provides the dry follow-up negation. So this effect is really unique, especially after we have got Asker and his Resonant Shields effect, which only works for one combat, but here, the follow-up negation of Hilda can work for every single combat. Even the lazy part of Hilda's weapon refine is quite easy to trigger because it has got two conditions, so you can just use her as a support and pretty easily get this effect. And the refine part where she's not lazy, she's able to get 10% true damage based on her speed, and also gets extra attack and speed, which I've already included before. So the true damage is not really all that much, but still it can help you in combat. And finally, with this weapon refine, she's able to get 40% damage reduction on foes' first attack. So it's not really speed based damage reduction, and she's just going to be able to get that 40% damage reduction, which does have good synergy with the base null follow-up that she comes with. So Hilda becomes a pretty unique support ally for many of the tanks, which don't really have the follow-up negation effect like Brave Hector or Ascended Idun and some of the other preferred weapon users, and she can also work better in combat and even as a hybrid unit. Nowadays we have definitely seen a couple of hybrid units that have good combat and also have good support, and Hilda is pretty much one of them as well. If you want to run Hilda on a budget, then she already comes with a pretty good base kit with null follow-up and attack speed solo, so you can simply have a more supportive slotsy skill than defense opening, because honestly the opening skill is not really all that good, and because she can already provide the extra stats to her allies, having any kind of drive skill is going to be helping you. Hilda is an extremely popular character, so if you're going to be investing into her heavily with merges and dragon flowers, then this is the build that you can run. So you can try and run Vital Astra on her because she can get pretty fast and you can just stack the damage reduction, and damage reduction of course stacks multiplicatively, and you can also run speed smoke 4 here so that you can stack up even more damage reduction. And now follow up is pretty much going to be the best slot B skill of Hilda because it is going to be helping her in many matchups, and as it is she can get the damage reduction out of her weapon, even her special and her slot C skill. So I do like her default null follow up quite a lot. Vital Astra is not going to get pre-charged that easily because she doesn't have a -1 special cooldown effect in her weapon, but still it's a pretty good skill just to get the damage with a low cooldown special that is based on her speed. And as it is, she is going to be getting the true damage out of her speed with her weapon, so just doubling down on that with Vital Astra is pretty nice. And you can also run her with Distant Dart at max investment, so you can get the damage reduction from her weapon and slot C skill. And again, Vital Astra is a pretty nice damaging special for Hilda. It's not the most necessary special, but it is still a pretty good damaging special for its low cooldown. You can also run bonus doubler just so that she can buff up all of her stats, and this is again a more combat oriented route. As for her last combat build, you can try and build her only for the player phase, and this can definitely help you because she has got that damage reduction on foe's first attack, so she can actually be pretty bulky, and then she can recover any kind of HP with the Surge Sparrow. So that can allow Hilda to hit hard and also be tanky in the player phase. And now let's move on to the supportive build for Hilda. In my opinion, she could be used in the Astra season with save tanks. Save tanks as it is excel in the Astra season with the support of Elimine, and there's really no Asker that he can run instead to get that follow-up negation here in this season, so that's why Astra season is pretty nice. So in my opinion, it's a lot easier to build her up for the support effect than it is for a combat, because she's going to be facing competition when it comes to a combat oriented build. But for the support, she's pretty unique, and it doesn't really take that much resources either because her stats are not really that relevant. If anything, the low defense actually helps you be a lot more consistent with the lazy part of her weapon refine, which is actually the most unique part because she's able to support her allies. So you can simply run a Rue skill and also run double distant guard to support your safe tanks, especially the far safe tank, which is going to be taking a lot of ranged nukes. And Life and Death can help you soak up the Bright Shrine debuffs as well in some situations, especially when you're going to be using safe tanks and they're not going to be the fastest. She can also be used as a support unit outside of Aether Raids offense, and it really depends on which stats you want to boost up with the drive skills for her Slot C and Sacred Seal, because as it is, she can give extra stats to the allies and also the follow-up negation. And finally, if you're going to be running her in Arena with Duel Infantry, then you can simply run Chill Defense Res for more support and also for the scoring. And you can just run the Join Drive skill so that you can support your allies. And the follow-up negation effect can be so useful in Arena, especially for units with awkward speed stats. So at least they're going to be able to avoid the doubles from Duo Chrom without even running null follow-up. So I really like the fact that she can bring that unique support to Arena, especially for the units who have more speed than the matchups like Duo Chrom, but they usually do not want to run null follow-up and want to run something else in their slot B. Keaton gets an amazing weapon refine that increases his versatility while also just doubling down on his strength. So Keaton always had a pretty decent weapon because it was a dual phase brave weapon, and that is always going to be valuable, and especially with his high attack stat of base 41. But now, with his refine, he's able to get the tempo effect, which all of the modern infantry base units have. And with his refine, he's able to pretty much get lull attack defense, which can debuff the opponent for -5 attack and defense, and also ignore any of their visible buffs to their attack and defense, which is really great for nuking them. And then finally, he can get +1 special cooldown charge on his own attacks. So that means that if he's going to be running Glimmer or Moonbow, then he's going to be able to trigger that special on his brave hit. So that special acceleration can not only help him with Vantage and Gale Force, but also for tanking. So on the surface level, it might seem like Keaton does not have the most insane refine, but as someone who uses both Gale Force strategies and Vantage strategies, this refine is actually really solid. And even if you're going to be using him as a tank, this dual phase brave weapon is always going to be helping you in that aspect. And having low attack defense means that his slot B is open for running other premium skills, as you'll see later on. And by having this +1 special cooldown charge, it means that you don't really have to run Steady Breath or even support him with anyone like Thor, for example. So you can be a lot more self-sufficient with his combat pretty much. So I really like this weapon refine, honestly. And like I said, I do use the two of these strategies a lot, which he excels in. And also, of course, tanking is going to be really helpful, but for that you will be needing some of the merges. But for the Gale Force and for the Vantage strategies, he can even work out at low investment, simply because like his stat spread is still pretty nice with this kind of weapon refine. So if you want to build him up on a budget, then you can simply run him with attack defense form, and because he does have special spiral at base, once it's activated you can pretty much trigger Ignis on your brave hit. So that is going to be working out quite well with the special acceleration that he has got, and this is pretty much the budget build that you can run on him. Now, like I said before, he can function really well in multiple playstyles, and that is true with the Aether Raids offense Gale Force build. Now, because of Asker being available in the light season, he's able to get that time pulse basically, and also get the extra attack from Resonance Blade effect. So Keaton does not have to run Time Pulse if you run him with Asker, and in exchange for that support, he can provide Infantry Pulse to Asker, and he can pretty much try and have a team with lower Gale Force cooldown charge, especially if you run even more infantry units like Ash, for example. So with the special acceleration, he can easily trigger Gale Force by hitting the enemy twice, and because he only gets the special acceleration on his own hits, this is still pretty easy to do for getting the Gale Force off. And you just need to stack up his attack, and something like this can work even at low investment because Keaton can still hit pretty hard. And the tempo skill is really perfect here because he's not going to get his Gale Force stopped by any kind of guard effect, which is really good. You can also use him in a Vantage strategy, especially in Aether Raids Chaos. So Vantage works a bit better in Aether Raids Chaos from my experience because obviously the enemies don't have their mythic buffs, so they're not going to be as bulky, and less bulky opponents are always better for Vantage. So here Keaton does not really need any kind of Brave Lucina support or Thor support. You can simply run him with Muspel and get true damage with his attack stat, and Winter Bernadetta is pretty much the easiest way of getting into Vantage if you have seen my Aether Raids videos. So yeah, these two support units make up for amazing teammates with Keaton for this kind of Vantage playstyle. John Drive attack is going to be helping you. Just stacking any kind of extra attack is really helpful. Moonbow is a 2 cooldown special, so he's able to trigger that in the Vantage on his brave hit. So that can really help you just take out many of the enemies, especially with the support that you can have with Muspel. As someone who has used Shadows of Valentia Pala for Vantage and also Summer Edelgard, Keaton is going to be lacking in that aspect because he doesn't really have the adaptive damage of Pala, and he doesn't have the bonfire of Summer Edelgard, but still he does get the true damage on his special triggers, which is really good, and he cannot really get that with Gale Force, but still with the Vantage he can try and make up for that damage output, and the tempo skill is really good with. Because Keaton has got lull attack defense built into his weapon, you can try and run the new premium slot B skill for many of these slow units in attack defense bulwark. So this can really help you get the extra attack debuffs on the enemy, and it can also help you get the healing, and you can also get the obstruct effect. So bonfire could be run with this build, and this is more of a melee specialist build, so you can try and run attack defense unity, which protects him from the debuffs to 2 of his most important stats, and both of which have got super boons. So this can really help you. And then attack smoke 4, and then attack smoke 4 can prevent the follow-up attacks and can just give him better longevity. You can also run Distant Storm on him because it does provide him with the extra attack, which is always good for any kind of brave weapon user. And with the healing of Bulwark skill, you can pretty much make up for the chip damage that you're going to be getting. And with this build, he's going to be able to take on even the range opponents, and Keaton does not have the highest resistance, so that's why stacking that up with bonus doubler and giving him the buffs can really help him, especially with the attack debuffs of his weapon, with the Bulwark skill, with the attack smoke 4, everything combined, he can still get a decent amount of magical bulk, especially with his HP. So this is something that he can do only at max investment. And finally, if you do want to use him in arena, then his slot is quite open for running something that can increase his scoring, like Chill Defense Resistance 3, because level attack defense is already so useful in arena and he has that built in into his weapon refine, so you can easily run this. And the mana skill is always really good so that he can get that burst damage output, and he can also get the bulk and the extra attack. Rutger gets a pretty decent weapon refine that can make him a lot more viable, and it can bring him up to the speed with the modern sword infantry units. And he's also a free-to-play unit, so he definitely has that accessibility. So this weapon refine gives him -1 special cooldown and also plus an attack and speed in combat. He can also get special charges on both his own attacks and foes' attacks if he has got more speed than the opponent. So this is really great for charging up high cooldown specials like Aether or Gale Force, and this can also help you if you run Vital Astra, and even if you're facing a tank with a guard skill, he's still going to be able to charge up his Vital Astra and attack them. And finally, with this weapon refine, he can get speed based damage reduction, which can go all the way up to 40%. Rutger can also be compared to Yanfei, who's another sword infantry unit who's free to play, and he also has damage reduction built into this weapon. But unlike Rutger, he doesn't really have the special charges or -1 special cooldown, while Rutger does not really have distant counter in his weapon. I do have a plus in Yanfei that I use on my free to play account, and I do use him in arena as well. And personally, out of these two, I feel like Rutger is the better sword infantry unit for the free to play choice. Now, when it comes to the arena option, obviously Yanfei is going to be the better one in terms of scoring because of his BST. But when it comes to the combat, I think that Rutger is a lot better with this weapon refine, and he's also a lot more versatile and can do multiple roles, which Yanfei cannot really do. Yanfei has to stick to pretty much tanking as a distant counter unit, which a lot of time does not really fare well against the modern nukes that we've got. If you've used a plus in Yanfei in arena, then you definitely know what I'm talking about, especially if you use him in tier 21. So Rutger at least has got better combat, and it really depends on you if you want to select a sword infantry unit for the combat or for the arena scoring. Speaking of Rutger's combat, he can actually have Vital Astra as a pre-charge special because of having -1 special cooldown weapon, which can go well with Time Pulse to pre-charge it, and he can basically have more damage reduction along with this weapon, which does stack up multiplicatively, so he can basically have 58% damage reduction. And Rutger can also function pretty well as a Gale Force unit because of not really needing any kind of Flashing Blade or Heavy Blade to get the special charges. Overall, I think that if you do have some 5-star logged sword infantry units, then you probably don't need to invest into Rutger, because this weapon refine pretty much brings him up to the speed with how the modern sword infantry units are. It doesn't really do anything too insanely unique in that sense, which might incentivize people to build him up, and that's also because he's a sword infantry, so the competition is just absolutely crazy in that class. But still, at the very least, Rutger is able to stand out in the free-to-play pool with this weapon refine. I would only really suggest investing into Rutger if you're going to be merging him up and if you're going to be giving him Dragon Flowers. So if you're a big fan of him, then you can definitely invest into him with this kind of high investment build. So Attack Speed Ideal can give you that extra speed, which can help him with the speed based damage reduction, and he can also run Speed Smoke 4 so that he can get even more damage reduction. So this can stack up multiplicatively to 64%, and Null Follow-Up is pretty much going to be his best lobby skill. Null Follow-Up pretty much opens you up to more options and better matchups because you're going to be able to stop the auto follow-up attacks of the enemies, which means that you do not have to take the second hit of so many enemies, and instead of reducing their damage, you pretty much take no damage from their second hit. So Null Follow-Up is really helpful in that regard. And you can also run Aether, which you can use in every single combat because of having the special charges in his weapon, so it's pretty easy for him to trigger this and stay healthy in the range of the ideal skill, and also for just having that self-sustain. Rutger can also be used with Surge Sparrow and Blade Session for pure player phase, and this can actually help you because of the -1 special cooldown and the special acceleration that he gets. So he can be really bulky in the player phase and technically not take a lot of damage because he's going to be able to heal it off with Surge Sparrow, and having that special acceleration means that you're going to be able to easily trigger Luna even against the opponents who have guard effect. So you can of course run a higher cooldown special with this so that you can get even more healing out of the Surge Sparrow, but Luna can definitely work out because he doesn't have the tempo effect, and getting past the guard effect and still triggering your special against those kind of enemies is pretty important so that you can kill them and also get the healing. Vital Astra is also a really good special option for him because he can stack up more damage reduction, and with this kind of build, with the triple damage reduction of his weapon, of his special, and the Slotsy skill, you're pretty much able to get 75% damage reduction, and you're able to have pretty amazing damage output because of the special that scales off his speed. So you can easily run bonus doubler and make him into an Omni tank with this build, and it's pretty easy to pre-charge his Vital Astra with like Asker or Duo Chrom or with Legendary Hector or just Infantry Pulse. So it's not the hardest thing to charge up his Vital Astra. Now if you want to make him more self-sufficient with his Vital Astra usage, then Time Pulse is going to be the best Slotsy option where he can pre-charge it up himself, and that can just give you that extra damage reduction. Now if you really wanna, run the quad damage reduction skills and you just want to do it, then you can do it with the support of Infantry Null Follow-Up or with Fallen Lilith. I do like Fallen Lilith's Null Follow-Up a bit more because he can send off Rutger deep into the enemy lines and he's still able to get the Null Follow-Up support from Fallen Lilith. And with this kind of build, with the quad damage reduction, you're able to get 85% damage reduction. But keep in mind that just because you get damage reduction does not mean that you're invincible. There's stuff like Legendary Nana, there's Lethality, Deadeye, Sublime Heaven, all of those specials which can pierce through your 85% damage reduction right off the bat and pretty much not care about 4 of the skills which you're trying to stack up the reduction with. So always watch out for those kinds of enemies, and if you're going to be using a quad damage reduction build, then definitely try and give him some kind of null follow-up support. Rutger can also be used in Arena, but unfortunately doesn't really score as high as Yenfei, but still he can get that damage reduction and then some by being able to pre-charge his Vital Astra. Competitively, Rutger doesn't really do anything new for a Sword Infantry unit because there have been many Sword Infantries who can have the same kind of role as him with Vital Astra, damage reduction, null follow-up and all of that. But competitively speaking, if he wants to stand out, then I think he works best in Aether Raids offense as a Gale Force unit because he gets the special charges out of his weapon while still having damage reduction and that -1 special cooldown. So that can help him in that role as a Sword Infantry. And that also means that he can easily run a Fury 7 Initiator build for Aether Raids Chaos Season. So you can pair him up with Veluria and pretty much have a 2 cooldown Gale Force. So even if he hits against some kind of ranged opponent and just one-shots them, at least he's able to get the Gale Force and then move on to the second combat and just get into the range of the Wings of Mercy allies. So with Fury 7 build, you pretty much lose 14 HP per combat, which means that in 2 combats he's gonna be in the Gale Force range. So this is something that you can do in the Chaos Season where no mythic buffs are gonna be needed and you have a lot more flexibility with your team. Seriously, Gale Force is really strong in the Chaos Season because of the flexibility in team building that you have, and you don't really need to run the mythic units which don't really contribute to your team in that aspect. And for his Slotsy, you can just run Odd Tempest because he's pretty much going to be going turn 1 most of the time. You can definitely start the combat right from the get-go or even from turn 3, it really depends. And then you can also use him in regular Aether Raids, especially in the Light Season, because in the Astro Season, as it is, Thor just does a way better job as an Initiator, and she also has Word Breaker. So in the Light Season, at least, Rutger is able to do something different, and he's not going to be competing with other red mythics like Regin, Plumeria, so that can definitely help. So basically, with this kind of build, you can just run him with Wings of Mercy and then teleport and just kill the enemy. So with Asker's support, he's able to get 2 cooldown special by also running his own Time Pulse. And again, having 2 cooldown special is still really helpful because even if you one-shot an enemy, you're still able to get the Gale Force off no matter what. I mean, unless they have got the guard skill. In that case, Rutger doesn't have the tempo. If you can have a 2 cooldown Gale Force, then that is pretty much the ideal and the best scenario for any kind of Gale Force team. And then finally, he can also be used as an initiator himself by using Winter Benedetta so that he can use Reciprocal Aid or Ardent Sacrifice to get into the Wings of Mercy range. And with this kind of build, you can just run double Brace and attack speed because we already know that he's going to be at 50% HP, so the Brazen skills are really consistent with this kind of strategy. And he can also get the damage reduction with the high speed that he can get. And you want to run Null Follow-Up so that he can of course double attack Medius. That is a really important matchup. And even Tempest can work here because he's mostly going to be sacrificing his HP and just setting up on the first turn, and then he would like to go on the second turn pretty much. So that can help. And the unfortunate problem with this initiator build is that he's still not able to kill Medius. Despite stacking up all of the attack and everything, Medius that is optimally built can still survive with a single digit HP. So if you don't really face the optimal Medius, then Rutger can just kill him, but the optimal Medius are going to be the troublesome opponents. So you can always try and support Rutger with like Sabotage defense support, or maybe by giving him the long range support from Peony and Flower of Joy, or maybe crossbar attacks. All of those is going to be helpful, and he can try and beat Medius if you stack enough attack and support on him. But without any kind of support, it is a bit hard for Rutger to kill an optimal Medius that is stacking up defense and resistance. But I believe that with the Distant Counter Sacred Seal, a lot of people are going to be running that on Medius. And that is actually a pretty good news for Rutger, because that means that less bulk on Medius, and that is a lot easier for him to kill. So that is definitely something you should be knowing. The Medius matchup is super important for a Gale Force team. Make sure to share this video with your friends if they're trying to build up any of these units. I definitely went in depth with a lot of the builds for different game modes. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to leave a like and a comment. Helps me tremendously. And if you really enjoyed, you could always support me directly by using super thanks or by becoming a YouTube member. And for more FEH videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as Mufasa's distant counter when he's not transformed. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.